Hello and welcome to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. I'm Luke Plimmer.
And I'm Laura East.
And each episode takes a look at a different aspect of the wonderful world of amateur theatre and features an amateur theatre maker talking about their theatrical life, theatrical loves and the times when they've died on stage. Our Backstage Pass feature takes us behind the scenes at the Crescent Theatre, Birmingham to discover more about what goes into making a great amateur production.
Today's episode is all about the Crescent Theatre's upcoming production of the Florian Zeller play, The Father, which will be running at the Crescent from the 27th of May to the 3rd of June. We'll be talking to the actor and director for the Crescent Theatre, Mark Thompson.
And John O'Neill, our Backstage Pass holder, will be going behind the scenes at the Crescent Theatre and will be speaking to Irene in the Crescent Theatre box office to just learn a little more about what goes on in the day-to-day running of the theatre. So, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's really delightful to talk to you. So, you're directing the upcoming production of The Father. So, what drew you to The Father? What's the play about?
Okay, well, the process for me is usually, do I want to be in something first and then direct second? I'd been in something already the first part of the season, so I was looking to direct something. I like things that are going to be a challenge for actors and for the director that's going to make me think as well as the actors, and certainly The Father does that. Like a lot of people, I know it from the film, so having seen the film and seeing how well it played as a film, it intrigued me as to how that would work on a stage. So that's what drew me initially, and then reading it, knowing that would be something hard to do in the studio as a challenge, but it's also an affecting play. As a play, it is, I think a lot of people know it as a play that deals with dementia or Alzheimer's or some unnamed condition that Andre, the father, is experiencing. But then we as the audience are watching it mostly through his eyes. But one thing we have discovered about the play is that it's contradictory. But essentially it's through his eyes. So his memory is not reliable. The place he's in is not reliable. People seem to be different people. And as we go through the play, it's a kind of revealing of certain truths about his condition and his situation as we reach the end of the play. And it's emotional in that sense.
So, Mark, the playwright Florian Zeller is also a novelist, theatre director, and more recently a screenwriter and a film director. So, as you've alluded to, you've seen the film. Mm-hmm. Do you see influences of the novel and film forms in the way he's constructed The Father?
I think I do, if that makes sense. I think chronology is very important in the play. And I've spent a lot of time trying to get my head around whether certain scenes exist before other scenes and whether they really existed at all. And I think that is something that works far more easily for a reader in a book, that you can switch chronology and use the kind of internal narrative of a novel to guide or challenge a reader. That then being transposed onto a stage becomes is more difficult. And maybe that's where his natural instincts as a novelist probably underpinned the way it's structured as a play. I think his journey into film has come after his theatre work, so it can be quite filmic. I think it does, when having seen the film, it does lend itself to film. Yeah. Maybe that was part of his process originally, but it certainly holds up as a play as well.
I've definitely seen more use of film in the theatre, as it were, recently. So stills or projections and moving images and stuff. Are you using any of those tricks in this?
No.
Relying on your theatrical instincts?
Very, it's a very basic approach in the sense of it's theatre. The one thing about the play that is hard to achieve for us, kind of potentially get into the realm of spoilers. In the script, it describes the setting changing and furniture disappearing. And in if it's performed with limitless space and budget, I suppose, or facilities, the audience isn't necessarily aware that furniture is gone. And the recurring stage direction, which is quite painful for us, is almost immediately. So all these things happen almost immediately. And that is the most difficult thing for us to do. So we can't do that. So we've had to formulate a different way of approaching it. And I think the biggest development over our rehearsal period has been an acknowledgement that has to become a part of a kind of stamp of our performance, that it's not just to get things off stage, which it is. We've got to get things off stage. So, but actually, hopefully, will be seen as an aesthetic that we've done that isn't suggested in the script. It's something we've had to do to get around certain issues, but has become now the mark of our production.
So The Father is one of 3 standalone plays that Zeller wrote. The other 2 were The Mother and The Son. So have you had any experience with those 2, or is there anything in those that have influenced you with this one?
The simple answer to that question is no.
Okay, fair enough.
In anticipation of this, my copy that I read initially before pitching to do the play comes with The Mother. I haven't read The Son, and my understanding was that it was 3 plays where he was approaching different roles in a family that weren't necessarily connected. However, just this morning I opened up the copy of The Mother to find that the 2 principal characters are called Pierre and Anne, and the 2 principal characters in our production called Pierre and Anne, so they could very well be the same people. I think, from what I can gather, the son and the mother seem to be far more interconnected. I think chronology is and time is an important theme across all these plays, and it seems that the mother is when the son has left home, and the son is when the son is definitely at home, and there's the frictions between parents. But the father is about Anne's father. It's not the father of that family. So even if there is this connection, which I've not explored because I've not read those plays, I think it's still set slightly aside, above, however you'd want to describe it.
So the play The Father, it was originally written and set in France. Have you kept this setting or moved it to Britain, and what influenced that decision?
Yeah, we've definitely not moved it to Britain. It is what it is. There are characters with French names. There's a Pierre, there's an Anne, an Andre. But the one thing that I have done is I've found some music that's French, although I've also discovered it's not, it's Belgian, but still. The plan was to use music for stage transitions, and I always like to use music in my productions. And I just posed myself the question, well, what sort of thing might have Andre listened to when he was younger, in the 50s or 60s? We don't reference that, that's never referenced in the play. We don't hear about that sort of stuff, but just to soundtrack it, so I essentially used Amazon Music and Google. Clearly the first thing that I would think of might be Edith Piaf, so yes, we've used a little bit of that, but I found some other stuff that I personally did not know, and kind of that's, apart from people who can clearly speak French, it's used for just an emotional resonance, and also that slightly alienating feel of listening to pop music that would have been very popular in a particular country, but you don't recognise it, to have that sort of alienating feel. And I think a couple of the songs, just by pure coincidence, they felt right. Talking to Brian, who's playing Andre, they were popular, they were kind of known, and some people might know them as well. So that's worked out quite nicely. There's a French newspaper that makes an appearance, and I think we're aiming for French wine, but no, it's not been anglicised, but it's all about the interior of a home anyway. So that there is a reference to Paris, but beyond that, it's about the interior, and that interior kind of paralleling the interior of a man's mind as it changes. So that's where we've gone.
So the character could have been from anywhere.
Yeah.
Anyone can identify
Yeah,
with that.
absolutely.
So as you mentioned previously, the play deals with dementia, which obviously is it can be quite a dark or emotional theme to cover. Do you find that you have to try and balance like a darker or lighter tone with this?
Well, the play is described as a tragic farce, and I think one of the most difficult things for us has been to identify where the farce comes in, because it's very easy to find where the tragedy comes in. And I've had a number of people say, "Oh, it's really funny, isn't it?" And thinking, is it? As we've not exactly been rolling around in rehearsals. I think the humour will be something that we hope the audience will be invited to access. At times, it is potentially laughing at a doddery old man who can't remember things, and the humour and the absurdity that can come out of that, but then is starkly contrasted later in the play. So I think the humour part, we're aware of moments that are lighter, and we certainly don't shy away from the humour being a part of the play. But to be honest, I think it'll be something we'll see or find the reaction when an audience sees it. I think we're very close to it now, and we maybe can't see those moments. We might find the audience are laughing at things we hadn't anticipated and not laughing at things that we did think would be funny. I think it's to be seen, really.
That must be easier in a way because you're not striving for laughs, and that
No,
can be quite difficult.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it does raise the question as to why. We often just ask what do we think the playwright was trying to do, and I think it is the natural absurdity that comes from these moments. But I think that it is quite a complex play to follow as well. Yeah. So if we don't have audience members laughing at jokes, we'll probably be quite safe in assuming it's because they're just trying to actually follow the play and are concentrating on making sure they understand what's going on.
So The Father has been compared to King Lear, a tragedy about a once great man, and father to daughters who ultimately loses everything. Do you see similarities between the two plays, if you try to draw on that at all?
Not particularly, I have to say. I think if I was thinking about King Lear, we know that King Lear is a great man because he's a king. Yeah. And when we meet him as a king, we very soon see him make the mistakes that bring about his kind of fall from grace and what have you. But the opening of that play, he's a king, ruler, and is a monarch. We don't really know in The Father who Andre is, would be the stark difference. Yes, he disintegrates, he changes, so he's got that in common, and it's about a father and daughters. There are two daughters kind of as part of the plot, so there is that similarity, but we don't really know who Andre is and what he tells us and what we learn as an audience and as the cast, as we've been dealing with it. We're not always 100% sure what we can trust as to be true or to be false or misremembered. So I think I can understand why people might think that, but I think there's more to grapple with King Lear about who he is and was, and than there is with Andre. We've very much focused on how we've approached it is not looking at Andre's past, and certainly with Brian, who's playing the role, I would normally spend time talking to actors about their characters, but I've purposely not done that with Brian. Yeah. We've just focused on how is he feeling in this moment, because that's all he's experiencing. He's experiencing this moment, because anything that happened in the past, whether it's years in the past or whether it's the running time of the play, he can't trust that that's the truth. And if we've had to make decisions about his character's history and the family, we've done it separate to Brian. We've had conversations and essentially said, Brian, you can't listen to this, which has been a bit unfair. But if it's stuff he wants to know, we'll tell him after the last night. Yeah. But that's how we've dealt with it. Yeah.
It sounds like you're having quite a similar experience as a production team as the audience is going to
have
in the end. So we don't know. We don't know what we're trusting.
Absolutely.
So as a director and an actor, do you tend more towards the comic or the tragic in the plays you're drawn to? What do you think that might be?
I'm definitely more serious. I think Aristotle had more to say about tragedies. He thought they were more important, and he knew a thing or two about play. So I'll go with what he said. I as an audience member, I like most things. Darker, tragic, more serious, if you like, seems to stay with me more. As an actor, I find it easier to tap into straight, tragic, serious drama. When I did Shakespeare in Love, it was a comic character, and people did say it was unusual to see me do something like that. When Red Line, which was generally a serious play, I did seem to have most of the lines that got the laughs, which was unusual. But I find that easier. And as a director too, I think it's easier to direct more serious, because comedy, it's a fine art. And if you've got the right actors, it makes it a lot easier. If you've got the right director, it makes it easier. But certainly I would be gravitating towards something more serious.
Do you have a favourite moment in The Father? If so, can you tell us about it?
I've got lots, depending on what the scene is and what the actors are doing. And it's a difficult play to talk about without telling everybody what it's about. One of my favourite moments is, and I'm going to try and talk obliquely, is a scene that has started in a certain way that you think you know what's happening, and initially Andre doesn't know what's happening, then he thinks he does know what's happening, and then a completely different character comes in unexpectedly, and it carries on seamlessly. The reaction of the other character that Andre is with to this other person coming in, who shouldn't be there, they don't react to it at all. And that's, for me, it's a moment that maybe people listen to this afterwards will say, what was that moment? Because I didn't see it. Just for me watching it, it's kind of very much in keeping with the play itself. So I like that. But there's lots of moments, but it'd be giving stuff away if I was
to come and see it.
Yeah, you have to come and see it, buy a ticket, etc.
We'll definitely be giving the dates at the very end.
Yeah.
And if you don't catch it the first time, come again the next day.
Maybe come back
Keep
the third
coming
time,
until you figure it out.
Yeah.
until you're sure.
Yes. So, Mark, can you tell us about your first love?
Yeah, I think that when theatre really kind of meant something to me, I think as a kid I went to the theatre, we went to see pantomimes, we did stuff, but the two things that really stick in my head is, although it's very vague, is a production of The Merchant of Venice. I don't know where it was. I think it was, I've got Worksop in my head. It was definitely up north somewhere. And it feels like it was in a church hall, that sort of production. But I would imagine, looking back on it, it was maybe a semi-touring production with just happened to be very talented people with a very minimal set. And there was 5, maybe 6 people in this cast doing the whole of The Merchant of Venice. And I think it had no right to be as good as it was. It's still something, there are moments from that production that I remember. And then the other thing, which is probably the central kind of pillar of theatre for me, is The Crucible. Seeing The Crucible for the first time, it was stage 2. I think we've all probably got experience of seeing the stage 2 production, but this was when there was still a smaller company, because there were only the right number of actors for the roles in the play, as opposed to having 1,000 young children on the stage. Liz Light had directed it, and her brother John, who's now a professional actor, was a 17, 18-year-old playing John Proctor, and it really, really made an impact to the extent that I've seen, whenever I get a chance to see the Crucible, I'll see it. I've directed it 3 times in different schools. I've been in it here at the Crescent, and if we do it again, I'd probably want to be in it again. So that one play really is kind of the most important play I think I've ever seen.
So you would say that's the love of your whole theatrical life, that one?
I would get into any barroom brawl with anyone over the Crucible, and I'll see it as many times as I can before I can see it no more.
Nice.
Stage 2, so that's the youth theatre company in Birmingham.
Yeah, they're very big and popular now. They have lots of children do amazing things, and when you've seen them with a cast of probably near enough 100 doing amazing things on stage, it's very impressive. But this was, I presume, way back when they started, and it was much smaller.
Tell us about the one that got away.
Well, it's always an awkward question, because if I didn't get a part, then someone else did, and I would never suggest that someone else didn't play a role better than me. Usually that's the case, to be honest. Usually I didn't get a role, I'm very disappointed. I see someone playing that role and think, well, that's why. And certainly I've had more knockbacks at auditions than I've ever had actual casting. But I think it's really thinking about plays that I maybe thought I haven't got time and didn't make time for, or plays that I didn't really appreciate. So I think we've done, many years ago, we did Streetcar Named Desire, and I was young enough to possibly play Stanley, and I just thought I haven't got time, and then I went to see it and thought I should have tried. But the one that probably really stands out was Taking Sides, that was directed by Alan Marshall and had Graham Allen, as I know him, or Braidwood, as everyone else I think knows him, who was astonishing. But at the time, I very sadly didn't know the play, thought Taking Sides doesn't sound particularly interesting, was very juvenilely laughing at the name Furtwangler, and thought I can't be in a play with someone called that. And then went to see it and absolutely thought it was brilliant. And I think it was, I can't really remember whether it was a case of I genuinely couldn't do it or not, but I certainly had disappointments. There was also a production of Equus, which I was very much definitely going to audition for, because I really want to be in a Stuart Snake play.
That's one of the
and then
directors at the
found
Crescent,
out,
isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
and found out that the final night was on the same day as my sister's wedding. And I did have a short moment of thinking, how can I get out of the wedding in order to audition for the play, but then realised that would make me even less popular in the family, so I had to forego that. And again, Colin Simmons played the role, was brilliant. So.
And as the last question, just to end on a really cheerful note, can you tell us about a time when you died on stage?
Well, I haven't died often in plays. I died as Magwitch, which was quite emotional, except for the night an angry husband who didn't want to be at the theatre opened a bag of quavers during that. And I could absolutely know. I knew who he was and what he was doing as it happened. And I died in Actors and Pals, but off stage. But I think I probably did actually have a relatively genuine near-death experience in All My Sons, in that part of my approach to it was there were these apples on stage, and I thought it would be quite realistic and naturalistic to be eating an apple. And it was part of the performance, and it was going swimmingly, but it was a 2-week run. And I don't think anyone has really considered the fact that the apples were just left on the stage throughout. And in one performance, I think it was a Tuesday night, I might have even had students of my own coming to see it. I picked up an apple, took a bite, and it was just mush. And in that moment, I didn't swallow, just involuntarily the skin went straight into my throat and then just sat halfway down my throat. So I sat there while the other two actors were talking, thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do here, because I might actually be about to choke. And then it was my line, and when I spoke, I now know how they do the Punch and Judy voice, because the bit of skin started flapping like a Punch and Judy thing. So I said this line in a really high-pitched Punch and Judy voice, which made the other two actors turn and look at me as if to say, what's the problem? But luckily, Miller had written in this grape juice, which is a really important symbol in the play. So I just casually walked over, poured myself a big, massive glass of grape juice, gulped it all down in one, pushed out the skin, and then just carried on.
Brilliant.
And then we had fresh apples for the remainder of the run. So
near miss there.
Yeah.
Like it. Very good.
That might be the most dramatic one we've had.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to speak to you.
Cheers.
And now let's hear from John O'Neill, our Backstage Pass reporter, who's been talking to Irene on the Crescent Theatre's box office.
Thanks, Laura. Hello, listeners. This episode, the Amateur of Life and Death podcast, has a freshly printed ticket giving us VIP access to the box office here at the Crescent Theatre. We're going to get an understanding of how this vital part of the theatre works. To tell us about life behind the box office desk, telephone and website, I'm joined by Irene, the box office administrator here at the Crescent Theatre. Hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, and thank you.
What does a normal day look like inside the box office?
I would say there isn't such a thing like a normal day, because all days look different, and that's what I really like. In a good way, not a normal day, because every day is different, and that's what I really love about it being so mentally stimulating. There are the tasks are very varied. In general, yes, there is the box office part. So I would say that once you come in, personally, what I do, I catch up with emails, with inbox, try to sort what I can answer to.
So you get
quickly.
A lot of queries from would-be audience members asking about shows?
Yes, or sometimes they ask, for example, to exchange the tickets, in which case I would call them. First of all, I would get all of that out of the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if there is anything, sometimes we do get some queries about venue hire, in which case I can direct them, I can reply and direct them to the website where we have the venue hire section. And then I would notify James and forward him the email.
And he's the theatre manager?
Yes,
James Booth.
James Booth is the theatre manager and venue in charge of venue hire. So if there is any proposal in the inbox about potential shows coming to the Crescent, then I forward him what do you think? And then of course the phone. So the box office is open 12 to 6, Monday to Saturday. So of course the phone, it depends. Some days it's quieter, sometimes it's busier. But when it's quieter, of course there is lots of admin to do, marketing, social media, mailings, and also looking after visiting companies. So companies who hire the space and they come and do their shows here.
Yeah, so they're not familiar with the building and they've got lots of questions,
Yes.
so they'll come to the box office and ask.
Or, if they would like, for example, to boost sales, we can look after maybe them and do some marketing and send out some mailings just to say, oh, this is coming, and also share more like on social media about the show.
What are your social media duties? What do you have to do?
So usually we don't look after the Crescent Productions because there is a marketing officer for that who is Erin. But we look after marketing for visiting companies. So we do post, for example, when a show goes on sale, we create an event on Facebook and we invite the company to co-host. Right. And then if they need some boosting for sales, then we can share more. Usually we create the event on Facebook and then we can share something on social media, like on Twitter and in our Instagram stories, for example, just a little blurb to say, what the show is about and what can be appealing for the audiences to know that might bring them to the theatre.
Yeah. And in terms of sort of the number of shows that are passing through the performance spaces, there's main house, studio,
yes,
and the underground.
Yes.
So there's 3 spaces, plus sometimes the bar gets hired out. So it's quite a lot of shows across a season.
There is a lot of traffic, yes. Yeah. And the underground is really busy, for example, in July. The underground is amazing as well for rehearsal, like to be hired as a rehearsal space, for example. Because it's small, but it's quite spacious. And yes, we do have higher, like the bar, for example, for conferences and stuff. So yeah, there is a lot going on.
So it's busy.
It is busy, yes.
You don't get a chance to sort of twiddle your thumbs for 5 minutes. There's always something to do.
I would say yes. There is always something because there is also the admin side, so I don't know, some filing, some photocopies, some emails, phone, someone at the counter, some marketing. So yeah, and that's why I said it's mentally challenging in a good way and stimulating. I've learned so many things being in this job. For example, we use Spectrix for ticketing.
That was going to be my next question. So what box office system do you use? And you've Spectrix, right?
Spectrix, yes. Which is very easy to use. It's very intuitive. And being in this job, I've learned a lot more because I have another job in box office where they use Spectrix and I do quite elaborate bookings there. I used to do in the past group bookings and season bookings, booking for 13 concerts at once. But here I do as well the admin side of it. So, for example, for mailings, we need to have access to customer lists and create customer lists. So create a pool of, customer or patrons.
So you have to pull all the emails out of Spectrix, the box office system.
I pull out the people who book, the list of customers who book, and then I create the mailing. There is a separate software to create the mailing, which is called .digital, and is linked to Spectrix. So I create the mailing on .digital, and then I send it through Spectrix.
And how many people are on the mailing list? How many people receive emails?
It depends. So, of course, we always have to select agree to email because of marketing preferences and, of course, data protection. So we can't, of course, violate that if they don't want to receive updates. We have a database of approximately 13,000 people.
13,000?
Yes.
Wow, that's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yes. And then it depends. Sometimes, it's better to target to smaller, to a narrower customer list, depending on their preferences, for example. So there is different ways of doing that.
And how do you know their preference? That's called segmentation, isn't it?
Yes.
So how do you know what the... Because they've only come here and seen a show. How do you know what their preferences are? Is it a sort of a guess?
So I can create a list, for example, based on the bookings that someone has made.
The genre, the type of show.
Yes, or if it's new writing. So, for example, I go through the list of the shows we had and I see which one are the new writings. And then select who's booked for these new writing pieces, for example, in the studio or in the underground, because usually in the main house we have for example, the Crescent musical, like every year. But then we have tribute bands and usually big shows or dance shows from schools, while the studio and the underground are more like for smaller audiences and more like intimate pieces and more like new writing pieces. So, for example, we can select the shows that have been booked in the studio and in the underground and see what attended those ones, and then send it to a
So there's quite a lot of outreach sort of marketing work in the box office as well, and I didn't realise that. I thought it was very much a receptive thing where you were reacting to work coming in, to people wanting tickets, but actually...
And that's the main thing.
Yeah.
That's the priority, let's say. But then there is a lot going on behind the scenes, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you're reaching out and trying to get that audience in.
Yes.
Interesting.
I think it's because what we offer, I love the fact that it's so diverse. And we have so many things that people can choose from. We have musicals, we have tribute bands, we have new writing, we have festivals pieces.
Sometimes you have robotic dinosaurs.
Yes, that's coming soon. So
are they back? Are they?
Kids show, yes, at the end of May. So that's kids shows as well.
Yeah.
So dance shows. It's higher. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge amount on. And do you have to, because there's so many different things on you've got a few plates spinning, do you have to be an organised and methodical person?
Sometimes there are things that can be organised, like, for example, every Monday, every Wednesday. For example, the newsletter for members, we send it every Friday, yes.
That pings into my email box,
And that gets prepped on Wednesday, and then my colleague Jess sends the test on Thursday to be approved to see if there are any mistakes.
Oh, wow, I didn't realise there was such a process to that email.
There is a process.
Yeah.
So for some things there is a process, other things there isn't a process, so it's more like having a good memory. And I think once you get used to it, it's gonna happen naturally that you, like, I don't know, for example, we have the digital screens with posters for the show. So if something is finished, of course, we have to delete the poster from the screens.
So how do you control the digital screens? You
Through...
can do that from the box office?
Yes,
remotely?
from the computer, Wow. It's connected, so
all the screens
it's
in the
covering
bar
all the secrets.
and on the way in the screens, aren't they? They're all connected to the box office computer?
They are connected, They are uploaded online, and then it's connected. And very, I would say, environmentally friendly, which is very important, like to, rather than having all these, flyer. I know many people, a lot of people prefer.
There used to be hundreds, if not thousands of flyers printed every year, and there's less now because things have just moved online. People use screens, don't they, much more?
Yes, and I think they might be even a bit more engaging. So, it's, but that's the thing. It's easy to forget sometimes if something is finished to delete it from the screen. So it's
especially when there's such a turnover of shows. So try and stay on top of all.
And
that.
It isn't a regular task. So sometimes it's just handy to have maybe a separate list of things that needs to be done periodically, to be checked every now and then. So for example, even school bookings when the deadlines are approaching, this is not something that you do every day, or it can be scheduled. So it's good to have to remember that, this week I'm going to check this. And that's the way you can go around this.
And it's kind of vital to get those schools in, isn't it? Because they're such a big part of box office traffic, they help fund the theatre, basically.
Yes.
They sell a lot of tickets.
Yes, they sell a lot of tickets. We're going to have some productions which can be interesting for schools, like Taming of the Shrew, Othello, and of course Christmas Carol is the big hit.
Yeah. Of course. There's so much going on. So I was going to say, is the box office a lonely place? Because you're getting on with all your tasks, but are you interacting with any other theatre departments much? You said that you interact with visiting companies a little bit. Anybody else you have to interact with?
Yes, it depends. Sometimes if it's quiet, it depends if we have a show in or if there is lots of people coming in for rehearsals. Because sometimes can be quiet, but then it's ideal if you need to focus and concentrate on something, because sometimes if the background is noisy, it's hard. Like if you for example, I don't know if you have to write an email or, speak with the school or take a school booking and the background is quite noisy. It can be hard when there is a lot going on, like people coming in and out. And then, of course, you have to check who is coming in and out, if people are signing in because of the security of the building. So it depends. Sometimes it can be quiet. It can be, I wouldn't say lonely, but for example, on Friday, I came in really early, around 10 o'clock, and it was quiet until 4. But then when there is a show, there is always a duty manager and bar people around. So I get to interact actually with people a lot, and which is really nice.
Yeah. And how are the theatre attending public? Do they cause you any problems, or are they as nice as pie?
Some are really nice, and in general, no problems at all.
Yeah.
Only some people can be challenging, but it's very rare. And I wouldn't say it's something specific of the Crescent. I would say applies in general to customer service. Yeah. There is always like that 1, 2 or 3 people that can be challenging. Yeah.
Do you get many grumpy people?
No,
people
I wouldn't
are generally
say.
Pretty polite. And...
Yeah, they're really lovely.
Oh,
actually,
good.
They're really nice, and some people are regular customers, so they're really friendly.
Yeah.
And you get to know them, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because they come often. So I would say no, it's very rare. And I guess that's because probably they have not figured out, that how massive a theatre is, in terms of operations and what it requires.
Well, that's good. That's a positive thing. Everyone's nice. Yeah. And what made you want to work in the box office? Are you interested in theatre and the arts more generally?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
Well, actually, I'm an actor myself.
Right.
Been performing since I was 14,
Right,
15.
that's brilliant.
So I started when I was 14, 15, I was doing outdoor theatre in summer and touring.
In England or in your...
In Italy.
In Italy, yes. I wanted to ask where you were from. I was trying to find the right moment. So you're from Italy. Whereabouts in Italy?
Tiny village in the middle of nowhere in central Italy.
Right.
I say to make it easier, it's a couple of hours from Rome on the opposite coast.
Right.
But it's still in the middle of nowhere. It's not known.
And what do you think of British weather?
It's ugly. But...
it's what did you say?
It's ugly.
Ugly, yes, it is ugly.
It's just not nice. Well...
It's a nice day today, but, Yeah. So anyway, getting back to it. So you were 14...
Tiny village, yes. And then I was basically doing these outdoor performances in, I would say, regional, I don't know even how to call it, regional dialect maybe.
Okay, yeah.
From my place. Yeah. And then we would be touring in nearby places. And then I started, when I was 15, 16, I started training with a drama teacher. And then went to drama school, then moved to Rome.
Right.
And went to drama school and graduated. And then specialized in physical theatre. And then I've been performing in Italy as well while working.
Fascinating. So, have you, as well as acting, do you do anything else?
Yeah, I write poetry.
Oh.
And I go to open mics and spoken word poetry events.
Right, excellent.
So, I write in English because... As weird as it may sound, it's my first language now. I speak it pretty much all the time, more than I speak Italian.
Yeah. In your head, do you think English or Italian?
English.
Yeah.
I even dream in English, and someone was saying that when you dream in that language, then it's when you actually...
That's when it's embedded.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow,
yes.
how interesting. And do you have a piece of poetry you could read us?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes, I would read. So what I write about usually is my journey as a person. So as I would say, I would call myself self-healer, trying to break all these patterns and things that have been put in my head, I would say, from, social and cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
Get rid of everything that is there, shame and all these limiting beliefs. That's what the poem is about.
Great.
And it's called The Delicate Balance. I hide, I seek. I hide behind the uncomfortable truths I refuse to see. I seek the ultimate truth which will free me from hypocrisy. I hide behind people-pleasing and shrinking. I seek my voice, and when I find the right channel, I turn the volume louder. I hide my discontent behind pretend. I seek to unleash my rage and to cover everything with its unapologetic flooding. I hide, I seek. A dance between hide, shattering of integrity, seek, returning to self. I hide, I seek.
Wow. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And finally, no Backstage Pass interview is complete unless we scan the polarising QR code and allocate seating to our backstage binaries, permitting only one of 2 words or phrases entry into the auditorium of personal preference. I will read out word pairs or phrase pairs, and you must choose the word that you will admit into the performance of your own life.
Okay.
That is, you will tell us of the 2 words which you prefer. It's really much more simple than I've made it sound. Clear?
Okay, so I'll pick one.
Yes,
of
pick
the
one.
2 you said. Okay.
You ready? Cash or card?
Card.
Print, is that because cash is more difficult to deal with?
No, I'm just like a cashless person.
Yeah, I am too.
I think, yeah. And again, in Italy, it's actually, in some places, quite the opposite. You know, there are places that don't even accept card.
Wow.
Yeah.
Print at home or box office pickup?
Box office pickup. Personal preference.
I'm surprised. I thought because you work on the box office, you wouldn't want the hassle of box office pickup.
But I am myself someone who was a hoarder of theatre tickets and programs.
Yeah.
And I like having the souvenir.
Yeah, I've found that actually, because recently we've gone a bit ticketless here at the Crescent. You can turn up with a phone and scan it in. And what I used to have was all the tickets, so I knew what I'd see, exactly the same. But that memento of the physical ticket is getting lost, isn't it?
I still have the tickets of 2012, I think, or 11 is the first show I've seen in London, in UK, because I lived in London when I moved. Yeah. And it was Three Sisters by Chekhov. And I still have that.
Yeah,
and
was it good?
It was so good. I still remember that performance. I was at the Young Vic. Yeah. And I still have the tickets. I'm like, oh, that was my first show in UK. And I don't know, there is something quite, emotional. And
it's nice to keep tickets. I love a bit of Chekhov as well. Right, poem or play?
Play.
I'm surprised because you're a poet. I'm surprised.
That was a tough one.
Yeah, I could see that in your face. Middle seat or aisle seat?
Middle seat.
Yeah, is that because it's a better view?
I believe so. Yeah. I believe that maybe from the end of the row, the perspective isn't so great.
Yeah, true, but you can get to the loo if you need it.
True.
QR code scan. I suppose it depends on your age a bit as well. Middle seat or aisle seat. QR code scan or manual check?
QR code.
And sold out or half full?
Sold out. It can be a hassle, as you said, for box office, but we're all in to support the arts, right?
True,
we want the full house.
Yeah.
We want the sold out show.
Altruistic perspective,
absolutely.
It's better to have the full house. But I don't know, there's something about having a bit of room and having the performance to yourself about half sold house that I quite like. Anyway,
you can choose though to limit the capacity and not have a full house.
That's true. Yeah, you can do that.
Depending on how you want to do the show. If you want to make it a bit more immersive, for example, you could reduce the capacity and have people actually on stage with you.
Yes, true.
Or on stage or in the space.
Yeah. So, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We've had a good old chat there about the box office and all sorts of other things. I've learnt a lot. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
very
the
much.
Opportunity for this chat.
That's
I enjoyed it a lot.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe at podcast.crescent-theatre.co.uk or via Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get the next episode.
You can find out more about the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and our upcoming productions, including The Father, by visiting www.crescent-theatre.co.uk or by following us on social media.
Amateur of Life and Death is a Crescent Theatre production. It's presented by Luke Plimmer, Laura East and John O'Neill, with research done by Liz Plumpton and John O'Neill. The theme music is composed by Brendan Stanley and it is edited by Kevin Middleton.